Welcome to the Success Flow Podcast, where our mission is simple: to be better each day and relay our findings with other relentless humans defining success for themselves. If that sounds like you, let's begin. All right, welcome to the Success Flow Podcast, where our mission is to relay highlights and frameworks of success from high performers to high performers. I'm joined by my co-host, Stephen Harris, and today we have an electric guest for the audience. And not only are we going to debrief Boondoggle with an attendee that was there, but for the men in the audience, I think we're going to have just a great guest for anybody that's in any type of crossroads, anybody that's trying to make some improvements or going through that kind of identity shift of what they're wanting the rest of their life to look like. And this episode is going to be geared toward the fellas. So it's funny, with our guest, Stephen, you guys actually go back longer than I do, even though I thought that I was making the introduction. So do you want to kind of take the lead on introducing the guest today?
Yeah, I do go way back with our guest here. We go all the way back to our glory days of high school, which is pretty cool. But what's funny about it is we didn't really know each other that well. We were both in sports. I played basketball. You were playing hockey in Arizona of all places, but also a stud soccer player. But it was kind of around the same season of my main sport, so we didn't get to cross paths too much. And I remember when Phil said, "Hey, I got a great guy I want you to go golfing with," and it ended up being you. And I was like, "I know that guy." And here you are, Mr. Jeff Strange. I cannot be happier to have you on our podcast that Phil and I are collaborating on here. And you know, you've done a lot of things ever since those glory days of high school back in 2004. But you're now the COO and coach of Fathers of the Future, as well as the co-founder of Arena of Greatness Gym and the business development for short form content, which is a big rage right now. A lot of people are working on their short form content and all that stuff. But I'm excited to hear about the Fathers of the Future, Arena of Greatness Gym, and all the things that you got going on. And it was great seeing you this past weekend at Boondoggle. So how you feeling past Boone this weekend, buddy?
Yeah, man, it's an honor to be on here with you guys, and definitely what a small world, connecting through Phil and through the Boondoggle and everything that's going on. Yeah, we're holding up great. I got my Coronado golf hat on. We had some great weather in California this last weekend, and a lot of great food and great laughs and great connections. So it was a blast.
Yeah, I mean, after we had Ryan Corey on as the first official guest of the Success Flow podcast, Stephen and I were just chatting about how perfect of a guest you'd be for round two, not only as a former Boondoggle captain last year, but also just literally the epitome of what this podcast is about, which is consistent improvement and being around humans that are always growing and looking for opportunity. And your story just speaks to that 100%. You and I were talking in Coronado about how in our circle, there's just this common theme of the guys that we're spending time with in their, mid to late 30s, and the importance of figuring out what the purpose is beyond just material. There are kids running around. The calendars are full. We thought we had a pretty good idea about like money in the bank and business being a key driver, which hasn't fully changed, but how men today are kind of changing in our circle in regard to their approach to their trajectory. So I was curious if you could kind of talk about what you're seeing, given, your most recent direction with the coaching and the gyms, what you're seeing with men not only in that age group, but of all direction, that are really trying to look at the roadmap of their lives.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's the cool part that ties all this back to Boondoggle. Ryan and I were having breakfast one morning, and we're like, how do we get all of our friends together so that it's not just a meeting, it's not talking about business, but we just connect and talk about life and our schedules and what we're dealing with and what are the goods and the bads and the uglies, right? Because community and connection is what really helps bring us all together. And what you and I kind of talked about this weekend, poolside, is that community aspect of, these guys, these men in their 30s, 20s and 30s, they're kind of understanding business. They're understanding what it means to grow. We're all kind of in this like mind, body, soul network where we're trying to figure out like, all right, we're 30, we're not in our high school glory days anymore. We've got to do a little bit more to keep our bodies in shape, our minds in shape, our souls in shape. And so I think that's where a lot of this direction is going. And that's what Ryan and I kind of were like, all right, well, let's just do something. So he's obviously the coordinator of getting all the friends together and making it happen. But I think we both have this common ground of like, how do we just connect as humans with all of our stuff going on? And then just men in general, we need purpose, we need passion, we need creativity, we need why, and we can't do it alone.
Yeah, that resonates, man. We had conversation poolside as well, and just talking about like, what does the rest of my life look like? As you mentioned, we're all getting into that age where we got to start now preparing ourselves and recognize that plenty of opportunities ahead of us. And what you're doing is just a perfect example of that. And, let's take a step back a little bit. You pivoted from, what was a startup clothing brand in Bad Birdie and really launched it. I mean, you were the top executive, the first or second hire, I think, and really took it across the country outside of the local Nordstrom racks, and, your pivot from that to where you're at now, kind of talk about what that looks like.
Yeah. And I think that was, it was a great move. I've been, ever since high school, I've kind of been in the golf industry. So left high school, started playing golf, just kind of picked it up because it was, we live in Scottsdale. There's 250 golf courses in the Phoenix metro area. And so it was, what else are you going to do? And I was in sales, and my dad was like, well, you got to pick up golf if you're going to be in sales. And I was like, okay. So picked up golf, ended up turning into like more of a profession. I was like, oh, well, I got good at it fast, but I just started too late. So put that kind of on the back burner of like, I'm going to go pro, and was like, how do I turn this into a business? Well, Top Golf opened in 2013, and I got in the golf scene. And so I got this itch of like, how do I have fun, my passion in golf, but also how do I make money in it, right? And so that was kind of the first concept of, okay, I can have fun and make money. Where does this go? So I was with Top Golf for 7.5 years, helped open a ton of locations and building their sales program. And then, funny enough, my buddy from high school, Jason, started this clothing company called Bad Birdie.
Yeah.
Started out of his apartment, really just bootstrapped the whole thing. And eventually I hit him up and I was like, hey man, what are you doing with this? Where are you going? And he came over. We had, I think we ended up sitting on my kitchen counter here at like the weekend of Thanksgiving 4 years ago, and just were like, what if? And so that's kind of where it started. So kind of took it from nothing. We were a less than $1 million company at that point, and took it to a multi-million-dollar company and 500 retail locations and 900 golf courses, and just kind of really blew it up.
That's wild.
And so that was it was great, but there was just something not quite there that was fulfilling. The job was great, the people were great, but I was just, what happened was I couldn't find fifth gear. I was just going, and everything seemed to be great on the outside. So I actually hired a life coach the beginning of 2022. And that was what kind of changed the whole trajectory of kind of going, oh, okay, there's more to this than just making a ton of money and generational wealth. And then you start going down this pattern of like, okay, what is that? How do you do that? And he's like, well, it's community, it's tribe, it's connection, it's mental health, it's physical health. And I was probably 25 pounds overweight at that point, and just kind of drinking a lot during the Bad Birdie days of a fun party brand on the golf course. And so just a lot of life things happened, and a lot of shifts happened for that, for sure.
Well, we saw you poolside. You look pretty good, my friend.
Thanks. Not bad for 37.
That group was getting compliments. It made you feel a little good, like we're doing something right at some point. I couldn't echo more the whole coaching piece, which can be a triggering word, because that's what happened with myself as well, hiring an external accountability individual that's more than a therapist, which I am full support of. I've never gone down that road, but just a third-party individual that's going to listen to you and maybe fill in some of the gaps was extremely critical for me as well. And you and I were kind of talking about how the branding of Bad Birdie, as awesome as it is, in the niche that it's found, showing, a different taste of golf, that lifestyle, having a couple drinks, not maybe getting the best sleep, that can kind of tear in that we're trying to show up as business athletes. That can kind of affect the training and the mindset that's keeping us showing up, day in to day. And so what are you seeing, with making those adjustments that I've seen loud and clear, just just from you directly, but the guys that you're working with, making those changes in the mind, body, spirit. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing there with the guys that you're training with?
Yeah, so this is where, so Luke Kaim, who I've been working with for the last 16 months and is the founder of Fathers of the Future in this program, his story is very not unique like most of us. He grew up without a father, and so found himself married with a kid, trying to figure out like, okay, what does this mean to be a father? I never had one and never had a model or role model of what that was. So I've got to kind of figure it out. And so he started to dive into that. He was in the CrossFit world for a number of years and then transitioned into just strategically men's coaching and high performance coaching. And a lot of that, again, that word show up, every time I hear it, it resonates, because we talked about this weekend to both of you, of just showing up, right? When you just show up, you could hate what you're about to do. You could be hungover, tired, whatever, and you're like, this is going to suck. But typically after it, there's always this like dopamine that hits that you're like, okay, I was so glad I was there. I have so many guys that come to our Wednesday morning workouts at the church. They're just like, I hate waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning and working out with you because you kill us every single time. But they're so glad that they did because they got the community. They did something hard early in the morning. There's just a lot of things that happen when you kind of push yourself to just show up. So at Fathers of the Future, we go by a code that's show up, do the work, don't quit, lead with love, and trust the plan. And that's been a big piece and a big foundation for me is just, and that's the hardest part, is just showing up. And then when you start showing up at 4:30 every morning, and then you start to compound effect, right? The more you do in the morning, the less you got to do during the day. And so it just kind of becomes this fun rhythm of like, okay, I can do the hard things. It's not as hard as I thought, but it actually brings more, positivity to it than anything else.
Yeah, when you talk about that, it reminds me of just today. I have my neighbor Gary is my trainer. I got to get on this Fathers of Futures thing that you got going on because he's a little nicer though. I have to get over there by 6:15, not 5 a.m. But just today, I woke up, not a great couple of nights of sleep, probably the aftermath of Boondoggle maybe, but I did not want to go today. I was like, oh, I'm so exhausted. But you know what? I committed. He's holding me accountable, just like you're holding your crew accountable and your guys that you're coaching and training. And I showed up and had the best workout I've had with him. I just started with him a few weeks back. And in that moment, I realized that I powered through and just showed up like you're talking about. And I had the best workout I ever had since working out with him. And now you're not just doing workouts though that early in the morning. You're throwing guys in cold plunges and all sorts of crazy stuff, right? And I've got a little bit of experience with that, and Phil has a lot of experience with that too, which I'm sure we'll chime in here in just a minute. But talk about what that regimen looks like in the morning, and what is the workout for that? It's an hour and a half from 5 to 6:30 of everything that you're doing.
Yeah, so what we've kind of incorporated in this kind of new gym, it's a men's only gym. It's called the Arena of Greatness. And so what we're doing is we're taking about 15 to 20 minutes before the workout, and we're praying, we're meditating, we're journaling. So we're actually getting our minds ready for the workout and why we're doing the workout. Because a lot of people just go to the gym and they're like, yeah, I just want the guns. I just want the ladies to look at me. And there's no real reason.
At the pool.
But the pool, yeah. They're like, hey, you got to, GTL. Or whatever the acronym is. Gym Tan Life. That's what I call it. Gym
there you
Tan
go.
Life. And so it's this idea of like, you got to prep your mind for the battle, right? And so I would rather go to war with guys like you that are prepping every morning, that I know like, okay, I trust, Phil, I trust Steven. I know what they've been training and doing. I can go into battle. I know they've been putting in the work. And so that first 15 minutes is really just about the mind getting prepared for the hard 45 minutes of sweat equity that you're about to put in. And then we break it down at the end and do some box breathing and kind of bring the heart rate back down. Because most men aren't taking, let alone 15 minutes a day to calm their mind, their breath, their energy, going for an hour and a half. So we're really just trying to help train men to understand, like, you got to take some time for yourself. You got to have the mind, body, and soul in check so that you can go give gratitude. You can go be positive in your business. You can show up for your kids. You can show up for your wife. You can show up for your family in all these different areas that, like, you may be going like, that's too hard. I mean, I got a dad that lives 5 minutes down the road that I shouldn't be taking care of, but I have to, because he's ill, and my wife does the same thing. And so if you're not prepping and training yourself for said things, obstacles that are going to come to your way, you're just going to crumble and die. And I don't think that's how we were meant to be built.
I just love it so much, and like I knew this podcast was going to have to be an early one because of how the paths have become so parallel, and that the fact that men aren't really required. Life is hard in general nowadays,
Yep.
but it's not in a necessarily physical way that it used to be. And what we were talking about this weekend is how that is something that's huge missing in society, and the way that you are getting guys to do it in the beginning of the day, those second order consequences when they show up, that you've knocked that out early in the morning, you have created space later in the day that's going to be palpable for your family. They're going to feel the effects. Next thing you know, you're creating time in your calendar to create like things like what we're doing right now, that it is really important to have that outlet, and it only goes with making the time to do the difficult things. And I'm so pumped to see it.
You mentioned box breathing, right? And box breathing not only calms you down. That's something actually I learned in the last year, mainly from my family. There's some anxiety things and stuff goes on with my kids, and my son who's 10, we taught him box breathing. It's the breathe in 4 seconds, hold 4 seconds, out 4 seconds, and hold 4 seconds, and just do that as many, 4 or 5 times. And that really truly works. And I've used it in my own workplace. Being a business owner myself, you go through those ups and downs, and you go through those challenges and those dips and those valleys. And it is challenging to feel like you have all the weight on your shoulders, not only with your teams, but also your family. And sometimes, probably more often than sometimes, you're on an island a little bit. And so those little breathing techniques really help internally get your mind right in that preparation. That's what it's all about, right? It's preparing yourself for your future opportunities to take care of yourself and whatever drives happiness for you. Usually health is a big component of that. When you're healthy, you're happy. And so I think it's awesome that you're putting those guys through that.
Well, and that's kind of the Fathers of the future kind of three-piece suit, as we call it, is present, active, and engaged. And being present, you have to be conscious of that. You have to be present of your breath. You got to be present of your thoughts. You got to be present of your actions. We take tactical defense courses, so we know how to carry guns and how to protect our families. It's not just how's my body doing, but how do we protect others? How can we be prepared for other things? Because there's just crazy stuff happens. You never know what situation you're going to be in if you're not prepared. It's not a good thing.
Yeah, I remember going to, I'm telling Phil about this, so the breath work even deeper. You ever been to Savannah, that health and wellness spa out in Cave Creek? It's an incredible place.
I haven't yet, but I know some friends that have been out there.
So, taking that breathwork challenge, it was a 90-minute class of just intense, deep breathing. And you tap into your subconscious, and you're like, there was times where I felt like you were flying through the sky with your family. And like, there was a point where I felt like I was a warrior when I wasn't really a warrior at the time. And it actually opened my eyes up into what I need to do and what I need to become in order to fill my perception of success and happiness. And it was the most incredible experience I've ever had. And you just, scratching the surface with your guys, and that'll parlay into deeper, meaningful sessions, I'm sure. And even the cold tub stuff, right? Like the cold therapy, freaking Phil, we went to this mastermind group, this this summit that we did in Flagstaff, threw us all in an ice bath. And I mean, you're like having a panic attack in there for the first 15 seconds, but 45 seconds later, you're as calm as can be. And you could feel like you could live in there for 3 minutes. Easy. It's the wildest experience. And so anyway, I love all that stuff. I think it's great that you're working through that.
When you're doing the hard stuff, right? Like you get in a cold ice bath and then you figure out like, oh, okay, I'm in 30-degree water and I'm calm.
Yeah.
Okay, what other, how do I, that translates to your world, right? Okay, my kids are screaming or the boss is at me right? It just trains your mind to go, okay, I can handle hard stuff. I can do this. And that's what, we put these guys through Fathers of the Future through a 30-hour crucible. So they're 30 hours of in it, cold plunges, hot, cold, sound healing, hiking up mountains with rocks. Like we put them through the gauntlet for 30 hours on a very low calorie diet, and you take a lot away. You get in your head a little bit. We just did 30 miles at the Grand Canyon. You go to some deep places, when you're by yourself for 12 hours hiking in nature, but you get to get some clarity too, because you understand like, okay, well, what is my why? What is my purpose? How am I utilizing my gifts on this earth to help others and not just myself? And I think that's where like the Boondoggle comes in, and just connecting. And when you start to align with people that align with you, you start to elevate. You're like, okay, there's something to this. And I think that's why the three of us are sitting here talking.
For sure.
Yeah, that's so spot on. And I know that it may not necessarily be military grade, but it's pretty darn close for the everyday man of going kind of the SEAL team buds week. And thought it was interesting with you going through that and us being as close as we were at Coronado with Boondoggle this weekend as well. That was an interesting overlap.
Yeah, you definitely get some military stuff in there for sure. Yeah.
All right, Strange. So sum us up, and I'm thinking like for the Successful Pod, we're essentialists. We love to strip it down and keep it simple. Say we've got a listener and this guy is going through a true dip. He's on the golf course and a bird flies off with his kind bar and his hot dog within 2 golf holes of each other. Which may or may not have happened, and I think that Jeff wishes he was carrying at that point on the golf course. But say you're at a low. In all seriousness, that a guy, say they might be in a sales rut, or they may have just been riffed, may have gotten some bad news with their partner. What do you think are the basic kind of first pillar things, the fundamental platform things that they can do to start that upward trajectory to get started and really get the wheels moving?
Yeah, well, I'll start with this quote, and it's by, my dear friend and brother, Luke Kayyem. So the bridge between scarcity and abundance is gratitude. And so if you can break down gratitude and where you're at, if I could go back to 6-year-old Jeff, who is from a divorced family, mom's been remarried 3 times. I shouldn't be married 13 years. I shouldn't have 2 kids. I shouldn't have a successful career. I shouldn't, right? But when you look back and you're like, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I had a dad that loved me. I'm grateful that I had a mom that was in my life. When you start to compound your gratitudes, those can get you out of any rut whatsoever. Even my time at Bad Birdie, how it ended wasn't great, but I wouldn't be where I'm at if I didn't have those 3 years with Jason grinding and learning how to build a startup and understanding business. 3 months before I started at Bad Birdie, I was knocking doors in Dallas, Texas with my wife and 2 kids in an apartment complex, getting my teeth kicked in a sales role. But I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have that experience. And so I think when you really think about like what you're grateful for, we have a lot of great things in this country, and there's a lot of people without. And so when you can start to stack a lot of those things that we just take for granted sometimes, it'll definitely help you kind of push through that next level. And then surrounding yourself with a good amount of group of people. I've got a lot of people in my corner that I can call. We call them like the 3 a.m. people. I could call Phil at 3 a.m. and he'd answer and be like, yeah, what do you need? Where do we need to bury the body? What do we got to do? I'll help you. We'll figure it out. Right. So it's surrounding yourself with that community and those connections, because then you have a little bit more, gusto in your step, and you can go, okay, I can get through this because I know I've got a team supporting me. I know I've got a family supporting me, and you just got to stay in that positive mindset. It's a hard thing to do. You can surround yourself with good people and really focus on that. That's why part of the meditation in the morning every day is, your 3 gratitudes. What are you grateful for? And then pick one and go a little bit deeper and find the why behind it, because that can usually carry you on through the day. Like today, I was super stoked to be on a podcast. So it carried me through the day because I knew I was going to get to come talk about this with you guys. So I think those are my quick tips, but really it's just, gratitude. That's the key.
That's a superpower, man. It's a superpower that we couldn't agree more with. I'll speak for you there, Steven.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the hardest things. As you said, it's much easier said than done to have that positive mindset, but it's the reflection on the pivotal moments that allowed you to get where you are today, right? And having that gratitude, and most people don't do that. And it's pretty awesome to hear that you've already kind of maybe not quite figured it out in your own eyes, you may not think, but to us, you figured it out far more than most, and leveraging your experiences and what you went through, and you learned from them and said, okay, how can I do it this way? Or how can I do it better? Or that was great. I like that. Let's stack those wins. Or maybe that wasn't. In this case, so let's pivot and learn and, keep moving forward. That's what it's all about, is just moving forward. But, I love all this Fathers of the Future stuff, and you got the gym, the arena of greatness. And before we kind of wrap up here, you got another side thing going with the short form content stuff. If you're okay with pivoting, I want to hear a little bit about what you're doing there. And everyone's all over social media. It's always been evolving. There's a real turn of what we're seeing out there where people are self-branding themselves a lot more, but it's not just being the influencer anymore. It's about self-branding yourself as a thought leader, right? And so I think what you're bringing to the table with your short form content really will help a lot of those people. So if you want to dive into that, I'd love to hear more about it, because this is kind of fresh for me too.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, shout out to Steven for what you're doing on your channel. You've been blowing up on TikTok and stuff. And I think the gear behind short form is that, one, the attention span is so small right now. So it literally takes 2 seconds to capture somebody's attention, and then they're like, scroll, right? But if you have a powerful message and you have something to get across, people are interested in seeing the organic side. And that's kind of what we're trying to do now as creators and as thought provokers, is that we're trying to create organic content for people that makes sense, that hits home. It's not this flashy stuff, and there's still the Logan Pauls and all this stuff that's going to be out there. That's always going to be there, but people are looking for true organic content that's going to help their day-to-day life. And I think what you're doing, Steven, out just pushing it, right? You kind of challenge yourself and like, I'm going to do this for 30 days. And then now here, you just get on this pattern and you're like, all right, I'm actually helping people, and people are commenting, and it, then that's the satisfying. It's not the clicks and who's liking or how many views. It's the comments. It's like, thank you for sharing that. I just needed a quick challenge of gratitude today, or I just needed a quick change of thought so that I could get through my day. And oh wow, you're helping other people, and that's what's really seeing this movement grow, along the fact that organic ads is a lot cheaper than paid ads. So that's kind of where the company started, was that like we're trying to get rid of the way of paying millions of dollars a month on ads, when you can create organic ads that people want to hear and will be drawn towards anyways. We call it return on content instead of return on investment. And so I think this movement is really cool, and it's a way to just kind of express your own thoughts and get out there without people like harassing you. And I mean, I think there's still people out there that are going to hate on you, but screw the haters, and you just keep sharing your dream and your vision. And
that's right. They're not your tribe, right? You're building your community. And I think that's the biggest fear. And that was something that I needed just towards the end of last year. And I wouldn't say blowing up, by the way, on TikTok, Jeff Strange, but thank you for the compliment. But you need that nudge just to get out there and have the conversation, because the biggest fear is, what are people going to think about me? What are people going to think about what I'm saying? Is what I'm saying going to be worthwhile to them? And if you believe it, who cares? Keep pushing it out there, because the ones that unsubscribe, they're not your people anyway. And you're looking for the subscribers. You're looking for that community. And I think you nailed it on the head. That's awesome. And now you're building a business around that to help others, similar to me, similar to Phil, for this podcast purpose and other things, right? And I think it's cool that you're tapping into that. You're seeing that opportunity and jumping at it.
Yeah, and I think it's just one of those avenues where we're creating an AI platform, and I won't go into too much details because it's a long process, but the name that we've picked is a name that is a helper. It's there to help and assist, because there's people like me that before this, I didn't know how to create content. I didn't know how to edit or do all this stuff. So it's being able to create tools. And, I've talked to a lot of successful businessmen and women, and the biggest thing that they say is like, you gotta share your knowledge. If you go to your grave and you just die on everything you've learned, what did you do? And so I think that's like what, kudos to you. You're sharing your knowledge. You're helping people understand that like, you can do this. You can be regular people from, Scottsdale, Arizona, that didn't really do anything crazy, but we have some experience and we have some knowledge to give. And I think it would be disrespectful for us to not be able to share that with others.
I'm literally biting my tongue, trying not to guess the assistant name. Like, it's like, don't do it. Don't do it. I just want to know from Beth.
So one of the ways that we always ask this brutal question, and it's, what is your definition of success? And it's vast, right? It's different for everybody, but you're being a guest on the Success Flow podcast, and we got to ask you, what is your definition of success? What's your perception of it? What's your perception of happiness? And do you feel that you're on that path now with all the new things you got going on, or heading towards the right path or in the right direction? What's your perception of success?
I think that's a great question. And it used to be money for me. I think that was the key, right? I think that was a couple of years ago. That was what everybody was fighting for. And I think now the key to success is time. Time with my kids, time with my wife, time with my friends. I want to work as least as possible. I want to work really hard, but I want to work the least amount of time as possible so that I can spend the most of my time with my friends and family. And that's been the key to success. And I've been lucky enough to be in some rooms with some big guns. And the biggest regret for most of them is spending time with their friends and their loved ones, because they were so focused on the money and the growing the business and selling it. How do I get to hear that 15 years went by and their kids were out of the house. So a big thing we talk about in Fathers of the Future is, how many months do you have left with said, whether it's your kids or your parents or, Jesse Itzler's a big fan of this too, right? With your life resume and counting it out, he had so many months and summers left with his parents. And so he did everything he could until they passed away. And so I think for me, success is definitely time. How are you spending your time? Who are you spending it with? And then ultimately, how are you giving it back?
Do you know who Kent Clothier is? You heard that name?
Yeah.
Kent Clothier, look him up. He talks about time all the time. I saw him at a conference and he was live, and his biggest thing is time. The whole talk was all about how do you get more time to do the things that you love. And that's awesome. Yeah, that's a great one.
One thing you can never get back. You can get money, you can get food, you can get resources, but you can never get back time.
And I have a feeling this is not going to be Sir Strange's last time on the podcast, because we just barely scratched the surface about the practices that can allow us to get into flow states and achieve more in those hours. So we do have the time for everything, because it truly is the whole currency. But it is a school night. You guys have kids to get to. I've got dogs and a grill to get on. I think that's a wrap for tonight, boys. Jeff, we cannot thank you enough for joining us. Where can the folks that are interested that you've kind of landed with, which is going to be a lot, where can they find you and kind of look into some of the programs and practices you were mentioning today?
Yeah, it's been an honor and it's a treat to even be on this podcast with you guys. I'm thankful for you, brothers, and I'm glad that the universe collides this way. And I'm pretty easy. It's just Jeff Strange. I think it's Jeff Strange Jr. maybe on Instagram. That's pretty much my only handle. I have some sub handles, but that's my main page. Like Steven said, it's building my own brand within a brand. You want to follow what I'm doing, that's where I post it. That's where my kids are. That's where my 4 o'clock workouts and cold plunges and breath work is. So come find me there. Come join us at a workout in Scottsdale if you're here local. Come hike Camelback Mountain with us. Come do Grand Canyon. Hit me up. We'll go do some crazy adventure and we'll make it fun.
I love it. I know Steven and I will be there. All right, everybody, that's a wrap for today. Thanks for joining into the Success Flow podcast. Hit Steven and I up if you have our direct information. If you don't, we've got that official successflowpod@gmail.com email, and we'd love to hear what you'd like to hear from us, how things are going, and just remember to go with the Success Flow.